Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Fadi Deek, Provost and Senior Executive Vice President, and I'd like to welcome you all to New Jersey Institute of Technology. It is now my privilege to introduce Dr. Joel Bloom, President of NJIT. Dr. Bloom, will you please step up to the podium?
Thank you, Provost and Executive Vice President Fadi Deek. If you're going to be in the business of higher education, particularly technical higher education, you couldn't have a better provost leading the academic initiatives than Professor Deek. Thank you, Fadi. So let me start by saying good morning and welcome to NJIT. I welcome you to our campus this morning to hear about a very, very important partnership between NJIT and IBM. In thinking about it, it's important for multiple reasons. First of all, I don't know of any other economy that is growing as fast worldwide as the digital economy. This is about the digital economy. Secondly, it's an economic imperative. If you're going to be growing your digital economy, it has to be a competitive one. And we can't compete as a university, IBM as a company, without thinking outside of the box, without being innovative, without being adaptable, without being flexible. And this partnership in educating our students and others is all about that. Universities are been around for centuries. Some of us, not NJIT, still believe that the model will be around in the next centuries. The disruptive technologies of today just won't allow that. And in this kind of a partnership, this IBM Skills Academy in our Martin Tuchman School of Management is just beginning to lead to that kind of adaptability, that flexibility, to focus on the digital economy. Let me also make some quick introductions. In front of me here, dear friend, I'll make some more comments about her a little later, our Secretary of Higher Education, Rochelle Hendricks. Good morning, Rochelle. And I have the privilege of being the president here, but I have the real privilege of spending time with many of our alums. And one of the just outstanding alums, his name happens to be on our School of Management, Mr. Tuchman, a 1962 alum. I've watched and run after Marty for years. We've often traveled to Princeton and spent some time together. He is currently the CEO of the Tuchman Group. It's an investment group with holdings in real estate, banking, and international shipping. And for decades, if you rode up and down the New Jersey Turnpike and you saw all of those containerized cargoes there, they had the name Interpool on them. And that was a company that Marty and a colleague of his started. I learned this morning he's back helping to manage the company. And on the banking side, he just purchased the Bank of Princeton. So welcome, Marty. Thank you. Another outstanding alum, Ray Cassetta. Ray, good morning. Ray is the chair of the Board of Visitors for the Martin Tuchman School of Management. Ray is a 1970 alum, very, very successful labor negotiator over the decades. And if you go into the School of Management, and you'll see a new set of labs there. They're kind of the Bloomberg labs. And that's, as is the philanthropy of Mr. Tuchman for the School of Management, the philanthropy of Ray Cassetta for those labs. Thank you, Ray. So let me go on and make some additional comments, please, about the importance. We are proud to be the first university in the United States and the only institution in North America to collaborate with IBM I didn't wear this blue suit intentionally until somebody reminded me, you have a blue suit on. So yes, I wore the blue suit, vividly recalling the history, the outstanding history of an outstanding corporate entity here, an international one. So we're partnering on the IBM Skills Academy. Beginning this semester, due to the good work of our dean, who I'll make some comments about shortly, Reggie Cordial, and our faculty in the School of Management, we are prepared to teach business intelligence analyst, business process analyst, predictive analyst modeler courses will be offered to NJIT students. This is very important to our students. I won't take the time to tell you about my first job, work as an economist for a steel production company, and we were supposed to be doing forecasts for steel production. It was during the era when Japan decided they were going to rule the world through steel production. And we had a scientific calculator and a mainframe that took forever. Anyway, it just dates me, so I won't go on and tell you that story. So we are running boot camps and workshops for students across the university. Students will participate in these courses. They will participate in the boot camps, the workshops, and here is the critical piece. They'll have the opportunity not only to gain the knowledge and the skills, but they'll get the digital badges of the IBM technology, the IBM certification, the IBM tools. You can't think of a more ubiquitous body of knowledge and tools than is being offered by IBM. We'll be the first university to implement the IBM Skills Academy. It aligns with our history. NJIT, in its DNA, was founded by business industrialists here in the city in 1881 as the Newark Technical School. And we've been committed to the whole issue of education, research, clearly service to our country and to our community, but more importantly, or as importantly, economic development. If you go behind me and walk about a block and a half, you'll see the enterprise development centers. We have some of those folks present here today. Economic development centers, 90 startup companies being incubated adjacent to our campus, 800 employees, 300 of our students, and they're doing about $80 million in business annually. There's some material I saw passed out a little while ago. It's a booklet in front of you. I'm not very good with art, so I won't even attempt to describe what the art is, but it reports on the economic impact of this university in the state of New Jersey, $1.7 billion. So I like using that number when we get an opportunity to engage New Jersey legislators. We are a public university. We are one of the nation's 32 polytechnic universities. And as a polytechnic, it's incumbent upon us to give back, and one of the ways we give back is through science and technology, incubating companies. We also started 3 years ago, I was sharing with some of my colleagues at the table, something called the New Jersey Innovation Institute. With the kind of talent, the faculty, staff, students we have here, it is important that we engage business industry to help them and to help this university. It's not easy to get into a university if you're a business. So we created NJI as this portal by which you gain access to the equipment, the facilities, and the people I identified. When they started 3 years ago, we started with about a $10 million budget. This year they have under contract $63 million in contract and grant work. That's what the digital economy is all about. So we are educating the uncommon student for critically important careers, and this is the kind of education we want to give them, the IBM University education. So let me stop at this point and talk to you about some of the folks who will be coming up to speak to you this morning. And I'm first going to introduce Dr. Najib Attia, a distinguished engineer. I know some folks who have been distinguished engineers at IBM. That is not easily earned. That is not easily earned. And Vice President of IBM Global University Programs. Dr. Attia is responsible for setting up IBM academic relations strategy, creating next-generation global technical training programs in collaboration with universities, research institutions, and managing the overall award program budgets. Previously, Dr. Attia was the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of IBM Middle East and Africa. This I just think is terribly interesting. He was responsible for inventing and leading technical solutions, as well as leading the Africa Skills Initiative. With over 25 years of industrial manufacturing, research, and academic experience, Dr. Attia has contributed to shape the development of IBM's intellectual capital. I don't know if there's any better intellectual capital better than Watson, but intellectual capital, industry insights, and overall solutions for IBM. His specializations include cloud, business analytics, security, and supply chain optimization. Would you please join us here at the podium, Dr. Attia?
Good morning. I'm actually very excited and pleased to be here with you. And the first thing I want to say is thank you, Reggie. When I came to Reggie with the program and just to introduce it, Jack made that appointment for us, I was so excited from the first 10 minutes. I explained to him what this project is all about. I explained to him the story of this project. And I asked him that we can really start here in New Jersey and be the first in the United States. Because I was just coming back from implementing this program, as you just heard. I did that program in a mission in Middle East and Africa. And after we deployed it, as all of us know that the digital economy was hitting us, and academics were a little bit hesitant to go heads down on it. Industry couldn't wait. And if you are covering a region and where you can say in a country or 2 countries or 3 countries, give me someone who knows what's big data, and you get the number, how can you run your business? So skills were the key. We have to develop skills. We have to enable those universities to develop skills, and we have to make it that it is complement to their education. So it is a skill complement on top of your academic degree. When we succeeded and implemented that, I came back to do this globally, and I met here with Reggie. So I'm so pleased that this university became the first one in the United States. Not only that, it will be the flagship for the state of New Jersey. So with this program, I just want to highlight, this is not only the one thing we do in IBM Global University Programs. I'm also responsible for awards. And the awards, I encourage universities, professors, students, PhD students, master students, through grants, to come with new ideas and apply for awards that we need to see the next generation of thinkers in any field. And as I told many people I met with, IBM today is open to all majors. The old days that you think of IBM as only computer science or engineering, no longer. We are open to all majors, and as I mentioned it many times, I've seen an English major who's a much better programmer than a computer science major. So I've seen it firsthand. We are open to all to apply for grants. I need to see a lot of ideas. We really look for that partnership. We also partnership with universities for PhD fellows. We give some scholarship to students to continue their PhD programs. That is on the latest edge of research. In addition to that, we also provide, as we said, most of the time I say all, my team said almost, all IBM technology is available to you through a portal. It's called Academic Initiative. You have access to that. Within this, you can go, download, play, experiment, everything that you hear in the news about IBM technology. So I'll go back again and re-implement. We've developed the skills to enable the digital economy to come and fill the gap. We provide grants and scholarships for all levels, faculty and students, and we also open IBM technology to you to play with it, experiment with it, and put your own touch on it. So for all of you, you're more than welcome to send us a note if you need an access or anything that's not helping you, and thank you very much.
we will be sure to follow up on some of those other opportunities. We have a lot of people here who have PhD students in particular. So you've heard a little bit about our outstanding dean of the Martin Tuchman School of Management. I've lost track, Fadi, or Reggie, is it 4 years or 3 years now? Or is it 5 years? 3 years, okay. So NJIT has had a School of Management here since the late 80s. I arrived here, I've been here since 1990. It's a very hard place to leave. Every time you want to leave, you run into a group of students and you're just going to stay. Those are the students here at NJIT. And we were struggling with the integration of the school. It makes sense to some of us who may have started in the business world, of the role of business in science and technology. But it wasn't apparent, particularly when you talk to undergraduates. For graduate students, they get it. And then we hired Reggie many years later. And Reggie, I'm not sure how he arrived at this, but he started talking about business with the power of STEM. And again, what we're doing here today is an exemplar of business with the power of technology, the kind of analytics that we've heard about. So he received his PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Minnesota. It's a very dear university. My wife was an alum of the University of Minnesota. He has a BS, as I said, in mechanical engineering and an MS in engineering mechanics from the University of Alabama. Over 30 years of experience in research. He was one of our leading researchers when I arrived here in industrial ecology, sustainability, and industrial systems. Over $10 million in research funding since 1990, including a recently funded $1 million grant from PSE&G, one of the great Newark-based companies, bringing advanced energy efficiency and sustainable techniques to New Jersey industry. A significant aspect of his teaching and research has been focused on dynamic systems analysis, simulation, and data-driven decision-making in industrial and management systems, including design for environment, production, operations, and corporate sustainability. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dean Reggie Cordeel.
Gosh, I don't know how I can live up to that now, huh? Thank you, Joel, and thank you, Naguib. Really, on behalf of all of our faculty and students and staff of the Martin Tuchman School of Management, it's my pleasure to also welcome you here today. And I want to share with you a little bit about the vision that we have. And this vision is becoming really a reality for this exciting new partnership with IBM. As is stated, we are in the midst of a digital transformation, and companies, regardless of what sector they're in, are looking for people. And don't forget the people side of it, right? Are looking for people who understand and how to integrate fundamental business knowledge with technology skills. Sounds just like what Naguib said, right? Clearly, we are in a new era of working professionals in this digital world. And as IBM has said, this is the new-collar workforce. And skills for this new-collar workforce include a deep understanding of cloud-based business technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Those aren't just buzzwords. That's reality. Okay. What we have to do, though, is we've created vast amounts of data. So we have to extract what are those business insights and implement decisive actions in what is often a very chaotic, right, and uncertain business environment. So agility comes into play. It's critically important to remember that having the right technology is only part of the story, though. We have to make sure that the enterprise business processes are working effectively and efficiently, and that people are fully engaged. And the leadership skills are changing, and the needs are changing in that area as well. Because we have to keep the entire enterprise focused and able to bring about this digitalization. But the important thing is we have to make wise decisions that generate value for our customers, because that's the bottom line. So we are engaged with IBM in this flagship partner here at NJIT. And we want to provide unique opportunities for all of our students so that they can gain these real-world experiences. And as Joel said, we're implementing this in concert with the strategy here at NJIT is what we call business with the power of STEM. We're committed to providing our students with the tools, the training, the knowledge, and skills to ensure that our graduates are not only the most competitive in the marketplace, but also have the skills and knowledge necessary to excel and thrive as leaders into the future. Our overall strategy with IBM is to weave into the very fabric of our business and management programs these tools from IBM, engaging students from across the university, undergraduates, graduate students, including MBAs, business data science PhD students. And initially we're going to do this with 3 of the 12 IBM Skills Academy tracks: Business Intelligence Analyst, Predictive Analytics Modeler, and Business Process Analyst. Predictive analytics to analyze the big data sets and predict customer and enterprise behaviors. Business intelligence to create and to have ways to present these business insights concisely, be able to make decisions, and communicate effectively across the entire enterprise. And business process analysis to map, to model, to evaluate, and assess specific business operations, and explore process improvements that are going to be absolutely necessary for the technology to be effective. As Joel said, we will be integrating these skills directly into our courses, together with hands-on laboratory sessions, boot camps along the way during the semester, and then during the winter, spring, and summer breaks, the major workshops. And we will go beyond this. We're not stopping there. In collaboration with our NJIT Alumni Association, we're also inviting our NJIT alums and executive MBA students to special Saturday sessions here at the university to learn about IBM Watson Analytics and to earn badges, and also to be introduced to these 3 areas and encouraged to attend these workshops. There are also plans to expand the initiative into professional certificate and outreach programs to go beyond NJIT students and engage the broader community, including veterans, working professionals across the entire region. To get our students started today, our business analytics lab assistants have prepared a quick start manual for the IBM Watson Analytics. Our students decided we needed that. It didn't exist. Okay? Give the students an opportunity and you'll be shocked at what they do, right? So passionate. So our labs will be helping our students to get involved with the Watson Analytics at this extraordinary platform. Just drop by the lab. We always have lab instructors there. Drop by any time, and especially today when we leave the session. Come over and join us. We're very excited about this first-of-a-kind opportunity to work together with IBM across New Jersey and the greater New York City metropolitan area. And the step today is just the first, and that includes these tracks for IBM. Before I close, I would like to thank our faculty and staff of the Martin Tuchman School of Management. None of this would actually be possible without this outstanding leadership from our faculty, their scholars, their dedicated teachers, and also our committed staff. And also members of the Dean's Executive Student Council leadership, who have been working tirelessly preparing for this event and are serving as ambassadors today. So they're all around us. So would all of our faculty and staff and these student leaders, would you please rise to be recognized? And thanks again for joining us today on this very special day as we launch this new partnership. As I said, we are going to reach beyond just the university And we don't want our graduates and these students just to be competitive. We want our students to excel and to thrive within this new collar economy. And that's what this is all about today. So thank you very much for coming. And Joel, thank you.
So you're hearing today about some firsts. You will shortly hear from the first Secretary of Higher Education here in the state of New Jersey, Rochelle Hendricks. But before I do that, let me tell you a little about Rochelle and what she has achieved here since her inauguration in May of 2011. The system of higher education in the state of New Jersey is probably a little more complex than many other states. There's a President's Council that represents the 54 colleges and universities here in the state, and there's the Secretary who represents the state initiatives on the behalf of the higher ed community. And in her time here, you will hear, or we're talking about higher education here, but this is really a conversation about K-18. One of the beauties about this campus is we have a Center for Pre-College Education that has 3,000 to 4,000 students here every year, mostly from the greater Newark area, that ensures that we have diverse populations in these fields, in these STEM and STEM-related fields, underrepresented minorities and women. Rochelle has been talking, and she and I actually started working together decades ago in K-12 education. And her conversation is also about CTE. In my opinion, and I know that of the secretaries, if a young man or woman graduates from a high school and is not interested at that point in time in going on for higher education, they need career technical education. Our high schools have to embrace some of what we're talking about here at the IBM University. So they're prepared. There's many, many jobs out there in this new collar economy that high school graduates should be able to do. And it's very appropriate when you go into some of our urban centers that those students have those opportunities for career technical education. So Dr. Hendricks has been working on that. If you look around this campus, there's a little construction going on this campus. We're doing about nearly $400 million worth of construction, and that came from a future bond act that you, the voters, approved in 2012. That was an initiative of Secretary Rochelle Hendricks. We hadn't seen capital money in the state of New Jersey for decades, and it's not easy to get the kind of money. It's actually about $1.3 billion, if I remember correctly, that became available. NJIT was very competitive in getting its share, so of the nearly $400 million, about $150 million of it came through competitive grants that the Secretary oversaw. She is now talking about 65 and 25. It's about getting more of the students graduating from our high schools by 2025 into colleges and universities, post-secondary education. Again, we know a lot about the digital economy. It is a high school, post-high school, post-secondary opportunity, but it's got to be all of that as well. And Rochelle is leading the effort on that. She's been a dear friend. We've been working together for decades. And I invite Rochelle, Secretary Hendricks, to please come to the podium.
Good morning, NJIT and IBM and alums of NJIT and friends of NJIT. I've abandoned my notes, which is always somewhat risky, but I will say this. I'm extraordinarily excited about this partnership, and those of you who know me know that I love when institutions in New Jersey are first, and it's even better when it's first on the entire continent. So I thank you for that privilege and that honor of bringing that to New Jersey. I also know that NJIT has a habit of being cutting edge and forward-leaning, and you heard that both from the president and the dean. And so this kind of collaboration seems natural and appropriate. I also am pleased that I'm looking at the future right now. Higher education has to transform, and has to transform in the ways that you've heard discussed today, so that we're preparing our students in real time to do on-time, in-demand jobs with the kinds of skills that business and industry is looking for. At the same time, we want the research to be relevant, and it needs to be connected and informed by what's happening in the real world. And so to partner with a world-class corporation who's doing cutting-edge things in a variety of ways, with an institution that's committed to forward thinking and being cutting edge, is a natural marriage. In other words, IBM and NJIT, perfect together. Literally, and this is the last thought, perhaps, if you're lucky, that I'll leave you with, and that is literally a month ago today, we launched 65 by 25, Many Paths, One Future, which was New Jersey's attainment goal. And I'm pleased that my agency, working in collaboration specifically with the Department of Labor and Workforce Development, Department of Education, and an alliance of multiple partners from business and industry, community organizations, is committed to making sure that New Jersey has the workforce that it needs for the 21st century. So that means we've got to provide post-secondary credentials at the rate to move us from a current 50% rate in New Jersey to 65% by 2025. But we're not talking about just any kind of credential. We're talking about high-quality, industry-valued credentials, and they need to be in multiple forms. So the other thing I heard here was badges and certificates, as well as degrees. And I love the playground offer that IBM is. I'm thinking, can I get into this somehow? So you may be getting an application for me for the Executive Master's Program. This is the future. And you are in it, and you're operating from it. And from a state perspective, it means that New Jersey will have the competitive workforce that it needs, but it also means that you'll be doing the research and creating the kind of innovation that will assure an economic future for this entire state. My goal is to see that New Jersey prospers, and that means all of our people have to prosper. And we do that providing a first-class opportunity in multiple pathways with on and off ramps. That's what this program represents. I can't thank you enough for always doing what you do, and that is meeting the needs of your students, your faculty, your state, and I would dare say your nation. And I ask this partnership to help us change the world. We are at an inflection point in history. The pace of change has accelerated. And that means as fast as we're running now, we have to learn how to run a little bit faster. But we don't have to use our feet. Let's use our intellects and our imaginations. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm looking forward to spending the day and absorbing as much of this richness as I possibly can. Congratulations and thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Secretary Hendricks. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. David F. McQueenie. Dr. McQueenie is currently the Vice President of Corporate Technology for the IBM Corporation. In this role, he facilitates the evaluation of a broad range of technologies and priorities that are essential for IBM's future growth and leadership, and manages several programs aimed at developing technical talent and leadership across the company. He is also responsible for the Global University Programs for IBM and is Vice Chair of the IBM Academy of Technology. Dr. McQueenie's background covers a wide range of disciplines, from solid-state physics to high-speed interconnect design, to distributed software development tools, to participation in a startup software company, in scientific data analysis, to government-specific industry solutions. He has spent about half of his career as a researcher and research executive, and half in IBM's customer-facing units, including global services, sales and distribution, and software group. Dr. McQueenie has been the CTO for IBM's federal business, the Global Government Solutions General Manager, and leader of the IBM Federal Systems Integration Services Unit. Quite a group of accomplishments. Throughout his career, Dr. McQueenie has driven strong connections between IBM's research and IBM's clients, as well as the other units of IBM. He was recognized by Consulting Magazine as one of the top 25 consultants for 2002, citing his work to make the innovations of IBM research directly available to customers via IBM's global business units. That's the critical relationship, right? Dr. McQueenie, would you please join us at the podium?
Good morning. It's really an honor for me personally to be here on the stage with so many distinguished folks, both from the business and the academic world. And I don't think I need to add too much to what you've already heard about what a privilege it is for us to be working with NJIT. Since my first contact with all of you here, it's clear that there's a unique spirit and a unique set of capabilities and a passion and an urgency here that I rarely see anywhere else in the academic world. So my hat is off to you at NJIT for everything that you've been doing so well and for your vision of the future. The fall of the year, just starting to happen now, is an interesting time. One of the things that I do every fall is I do some interviewing of prospective applicants as an alumnus of my undergraduate institution. And I will tell you that the most striking impression I get every year is that if they took me from this time in 1976, I joined, as a freshman in college in 1976, I doubt that I would have gotten admitted to any university with the resume that I had at the time. When I interview these high school seniors today and I look at what they've been able to accomplish and the depths of understanding they have, and I think back to what I had, it's humbling. And if you get past that, it's a way of seeing a profound change where we've all moved forward as a society. If students can advance that far, then we must all be doing something right in the way we're raising the kids and in the way we're providing educational opportunities. The other thing that often happens to me when I'm thinking about visiting a university is I think it's very natural to think back on my university days. And I think the last time I was here and spoke to some of you at the naming ceremony for the Tuchman School of Management, I might have told you a story about an undergraduate professor I had. So my PhD is in solid state physics, and that love of the subject actually dates back to when I was a sophomore in college and took the introductory solid state physics course from Professor Doyle. And Professor Doyle and I happened to run into each other walking down one of the main streets of the university on our way to attend a talk at the engineering school. And in this particular street, the engineering school was at the end of the street on the left, and the business school was at the end of the street on the right. And speaking of construction going on here, at that time there was a giant construction project going on right at the end of the street, in between the School of Engineering and the School of Management. And I can remember Professor Doyle literally putting his arm around my shoulder like the wise professor and saying, "David, I want you to observe what's happening at the end of this street. What do you see?" I said, "Well, I see a red brick building being built." And you got that look like, "Yes, thank you." And he said, "The world of engineering and the world of business are getting married to each other and creating this union in physical space." And he said, "That's something that's going to define your career and your life, is how business and technology are coming together." That's a pretty good insight for 1978 for a physics professor, don't you think? And so I might have referred to that story, I don't recall, but it's a wonderful story because it makes me wonder how many other things that significant were said to me by my professors that I wasn't listening carefully enough to. So maybe an admonishment to the students present that in addition to being great teachers, your faculty members have a lot of wisdom to pass along if only you're ready to hear it. So I remember Professor Doyle's comment because it made a big impression on me at the time, and it's been a very simple way of defining what's been happening in the world of the relationship between business and academia and science ever since. The other thing that came up later in a conversation with Professor Doyle was he asked me about my interests, and I at the time was kind of split between my interest in engineering and in science, and especially electrical engineering. And Professor Doyle was a very serious professor, and he looked at me, very sternly, and he said, "Electrical engineering, you like electrical engineering?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Then you must really admire Oliver Heaviside." And I got the sort of blank, deer in the headlights look. And if any of the double E's here will know who Oliver Heaviside was. Heaviside was the guy, so let's go back to the beginning of electricity, right? Thomas Edison and Westinghouse and the big shootout with, Edison's company that eventually became GE, and, the Westinghouse company with Nikola Tesla as the chief engineer. You remember, again, the double E's in the audience know that Edison's original electric distribution system was based on direct current, like batteries. Westinghouse and Tesla knew that was going to have scalability problems. It was going to be very difficult to transmit direct current for long distances. And so Tesla, the genius that he was, insisted that their technology be based on alternating current. And the problem with alternating current is it's complicated, right? The current flows typically in the form of a sine wave, and a sine wave isn't just like DC that has a value like 7 volts. It has a frequency and it has a phase, and it's very complex. And it was Heaviside who was the one that understood that, that complex variables were the obvious mathematical method that you could use to analyze the very complex properties of alternating current. And so Heaviside was the one who connected a practical discipline, which was alternating current electricity, and all the tremendous, apparently baffling complexity of keeping track of amplitude and phase and frequency, and this very powerful arsenal of mathematics in complex variables that could be used to immediately bring order to all of that chaos. So that was an interesting connection, if you like, a very old example of the power of STEM, right, being brought to business. It happened again. It's happened many times. The next example I can think of that was like that was maybe in the 1950s and early 60s. It was very uncommon to have a computer science department in a university. There would be a math department, there would be an electrical engineering department, and the electrical engineers were concerned with building the circuits and understanding basic logic and building adders and addressing systems and virtual memory systems, and engineering those things to switch very quickly. Mathematicians would understand some of the algorithmic basics, but the idea that there would be this new science called computer science didn't always exist, obviously. It was something that had to be created. It was created out of the world of academia. And a lot of our academic friends will give IBM a lot of credit for, at that time, coming to the university saying, we're giving birth to a revolution in computing machines that are going to be used in business. And these computing machines have an emerging science associated with them that's a little bit electrical engineering, a little bit mathematics, a little bit other forms of engineering. And what we need all of you in academia to do is to understand how to frame all of this in a coherent curriculum. So really it was the academic community's contribution to frame what is now in the modern world referred to as computer science, which has evolved and will continue to evolve. But it was companies like IBM, and very specifically IBM in the early days, coming to the universities saying, here is this set of incredibly powerful tools that we're going to bring to business, but if the business is going to comprehend these tools and be able to use them to create value, you've heard that comment already from the podium several times today, there's going to need to be a population of people that aren't quite electrical engineers because we don't need them to design circuits. They're not quite mathematicians because we don't want them just doing theory. They're kind of a practical union of very deep mathematics and very practical engineering. And so the field of computer science was born. Once again, a very strong partnership between the academic world and the business world anticipating a revolution. And the revolution that came forth from that, we often just put under the category of information technology or IT, and it became common, and it's of course a survival issue today, that anyone who's in business is going to use information technology. Anyone who uses information technology is going to have an IT department. All of our clients, whether they're Fortune 100 or small and medium business, all have had to have a significant expertise in the use of, the deployment of, the adaptation of computing to their business. Well, that's very interesting, and we're now, I think, at another inflection point. And one of our research vice presidents, Dario Gil, likes to say AI is the new IT. So what does Dario mean by that? AI, artificial intelligence, again, a broad term that could mean a lot of things. We could be more specific about it, is the new IT. What that means is that the world of information technology has basically evolved to a point where instead of spending 5 years of product development and then a sales cycle and then a long consulting and implementation cycle and then standing it up in a business, so instead of years from conception to realization, the progress that's been made in information technology can compress that entire cycle of a new business thought to a running technical implementation, in some cases in hours, in some cases in weeks, in some cases in months, but in almost no cases does it take years or decades to do that. The research that underlies, the science that underlies IT still operates in some cases on a long time scale. Look at emerging devices to replace the transistor. That's decades of physics research. So we're not talking about the science necessarily becoming instantaneous, but what the IT revolution has done is used its own power to bootstrap itself so that I look at my colleague Gary Schneider sitting here. You'll be hearing from Gary later. Gary's responsible for the skills and the capabilities of our global sales force. When Gary and I were coming up in the business, if we wanted to be qualified to sell IBM products, hardware and software, we had to do tons and tons of education. We had to take tests. We had to attend Top Gun classes. We had to learn the speeds and the feeds and the specifications of our products. And the sales cycle, could have been months, could have been quarters, could have been years, several years of product development, several years of conception with the clients, several years of implementation. And so we were creating value for our clients, but the process took time. We've now regularized and patternized and remotely hosted all these capabilities so that today's sales call isn't sitting down to talk about specifications, right? As Gary will tell you, what we expect of our salespeople today is to sit down with a client who's an executive in insurance or oil and gas or healthcare or pick any industry you like, open their laptop with the client in that meeting and say, tell me about some of the business challenges you're struggling with. And let's prototype a solution right here by composing some elements that are running in our cloud using some data that's relevant to your industry. And by the end of this sales call, let me compose something that shows you what this capability in your business could look like. So that's an incredible amount of progress in the revolution we called IT, to go from a multiple year period from important idea to implementation to essentially being able to create a prototype live. And Gary's sellers understand that if they can't do that today, they can't play the role of sellers. In fact, it's interesting because the role of seller has actually blurred into a role of really co-creation, as we call it, with our clients. So we've compressed all these timelines. So now the good news is we can put the power of information technology in the hands of domain experts who don't themselves have to be information technology experts. I think we've talked about that for a long time, the revolution around cloud and componentized implementations, and a lot of technical content has really made that possible. And so what are we concerned with now? We're concerned with, all right, now I know how to wield the technology. I know how to put it in the hands of people that are domain experts that don't have to also be computer scientists. What am I going to do with that? What I'm going to do with that is I'm going to unlock the 80 or 90% of the data all of our clients have that they really don't take much advantage of today. Sometimes we joke and call it dark data, like dark matter. You know it's there, but you can't quite account for it. Most of our clients, when we do an analysis with them, tell us that about 80% of the data in their enterprise they think is valuable and they know that it's in their systems, but they're not actively using it to optimize and run their business or to understand their clients or to optimize their product development. So all the techniques around artificial intelligence are around how to deal with unstructured data, how to interface data to humans in a human comprehensible form. So there's tremendous technology depth under it, but the people using the technology don't need to understand the details of the implementation. They surely do need to understand the properties of that technology and the implications of using it, and we might come back to that later during the panel discussion. I suspect that will come up. But we've basically given this power to our businesses and our business clients to unlock vast amounts of data. And if you think about this as an imperative to change, if all of the businesses you compete with are now able to take this 80 or 90% of the data and turn it to incredibly productive use, creating value for your clients, you've got a horse race on your hands. And if you're not going to be number one or number two in that horse race in your industry, you're going to get left behind. So we've basically produced, again, together, the scientific, academic, and business community has put a set of tools in the hands of business that are quite transformational. It's happened before. It will happen again. And each time we've reinvented the nature of the interface between the science world, the technical world, and the business world, in each case bringing them closer and closer and closer together. That's what NJIT is doing with its strong legacy and its strong base, historical base of deep technology knowledge and an excellent school of management to bring those things closer together in the academic environment. And that was what we talked about at the naming ceremony. What we're talking about today is taking that concept and actually fleshing it out to say, all right, how do we train the students differently? What topics will we train the students differently on? How can I bring the power of academic research through your students to business and to create the realization of value much more quickly than we've ever done before? So I think of this session today as the natural follow-on where we talked about an idea a few years ago. That idea is now real, as Reggie and I were talking about this morning. An event like this renders something very real. And we're not talking about what we're going to do or why we're going to do it. We've passed that. We're now talking about how we're going to do it. What's it going to mean to the faculty? What's it going to mean to your partners like us? What's it going to mean to your students? And what it's basically going to do is to speed up this cycle of an idea to an implementation to the creation of value. Speed that up exponentially, just like the story of the information technology revolution. So if AI is the new IT, then everyone in the world is in a horse race on taking all of these untapped potentials of very large data sets. And by the way, in some cases, very small data sets. That's something that sometimes get lost. We get excited about big data because a lot of these big data sets, by definition, were so large that we couldn't afford to do in a reasonable time the amount of processing to unlock their insights. So big data is kind of an implication that, yeah, these data sets were huge, but they were completely unstructured. Maybe they were images or snippets of human language. And while we had computer science professors who could extract some insights, we couldn't do it on an industrial scale. So the world of big data says, what if I can now take all of that deep knowledge from science and apply it to business in real time? And I've got the compute power at an affordable cost to really do that. So that's wonderful, and that continues. But if you turn to some of the industries we work in, there may not be big data. It might be very far away from the consumer world. There might only be small data, but very significant data. Some fields in medicine can be like that. And so as we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning and training systems, yes, we're very interested in training the systems with big data. Turns out that in a lot of domains, there's a great premium on how well you could train a system with small data. How small an amount of data can you use and still create a system that will reliably do the things you want it to do? So I don't want us to lose that thought because it's a very important thought. The one thing I'll close with is, like every one of these revolutions around the use of technology, it's incumbent upon us, if we're going to put this tremendous power into the hands of people that didn't have to go through the creation and the details and the implementation, it's still incumbent upon those people using that power to understand why it works and generally how it works and what are the implications of using it. So in the world of machine learning, to be specific, one of the things that we've been very vocal about as a company, and I think it would resonate very well in an academic environment, is if I train a system, what training data did I use? What biases might I have introduced into that system? Either negative biases, like it will tend to always get answers like this, or positive biases, which humans tend to call intuition. Have I done a really good job in selecting the training data so that as I've trained the system, it will more likely, when it's not sure, tend toward answers that turn out to be useful? And so one of the things we've been talking to a lot of our clients about is, we'll be very clear with you when we train a system with you or for you, or we give you our technology to train a system for your use. Where did the data come from? How is it trained? What expectations can you have of its accuracy? Will the system be able to explain itself? I can remember when we in the very early days after we did the Jeopardy match on Watson, we were already playing with the medical domain. We took the Jeopardy playing system And we took out the corpus of information about popular songs and baseball statistics and historical figures and things, and we filled it up with the medical literature that we get our hands on in kind of an open source mode. And we started using the same learning patterns we had done for general knowledge and Jeopardy to answer medical questions. And the system actually performed surprisingly well. It wasn't going to be high enough quality or high enough dependability to use in a production environment, but it gave us a lot of encouragement that the system could do this well. And we showed it to some physicians, and the first reaction we got was, I found out later, the first reaction physicians have to any kind of an automated system, which is, I reject your system, I have a license to practice medicine, your system does not, medicine is both an art and a science, and I know the lecture, right? Got the lecture. And they rejected it. And we said, okay, can we just show you, I understand you're going to reject it. Would you just look at it? All right. What they expected was to give the system a bunch of data and to have the system spit out a diagnosis, almost like on a little ticker tape of some kind, and to basically tell them what to go do. That wasn't what our system did. Our system said, based on the information you've given me, these are the 7 or 8 things that we think are most likely to be relevant to you, the human being, to understand this set of facts better. And here they are in descending order of confidence that we understood your problem. And oh, by the way, each one of them has a link to what's called an evidence profile. And if you click on that link, the system will tell you why it put that in number 1, why it's 70% confident that that's relevant. And so the system had a degree of humility, which is it didn't say to the human, here's the answer, because the field is much too complex for that. Every human practitioner knows that. So the system was humble, and it said, based on the body of information I have and based on my understanding of what you've told me, here's a rank-ordered list of some things I'm 70% sure are relevant and some things I'm 10% sure are relevant, and here's a link where you can decide if you believe me or not. Well, that was a night and day change. So the same physicians that gave us the Heisman, as they say, started, wait a minute, that's interesting. Wait a minute, I didn't know that. There's a study that says that, right? So we started down the path in medicine. We worked with one of the professors at Columbia, and the professor at Columbia told us a story about when he was a young MD in a hospital, and a patient came in, and it sounded almost like the TV show House, where a woman came in as a patient, had a potentially fatal affliction. She was on a path to pass away in a couple of weeks if they didn't figure out what the nature of her problem was. No one could figure it out. They canvassed every source of data, every colleague that they could think of. They were losing a battle. Again, just like this TV show, they were losing a battle. This woman was going to die if they didn't figure it out. And a colleague who'd practiced medicine in some remote part of the world said, oh, have you thought about this? Well, they went and looked up this in the medical library. It turned out this was her affliction. It turned out they were able to treat this patient. They were able to save her life. This particular physician became, it turns out, lifelong friends with this patient. So it's kind of an interesting story. And so he said, this looks interesting. Give me that terminal. And he started putting together a profile of the information he could remember that they were given when this patient came to them. And he made the query to the system, and it came back with about 7 or 8 prioritized things for further investigation. And what they ended up finding, essentially by serendipity, that saved this woman's life was, I think, number 2 or number 3 on the list of 7 prioritized things. And he looked at us and he smiled and he said, I think you guys are onto something. Right? Now, since then, we've been a tremendous horse race with maturing this technology to production use, and especially on a horse race of how quickly can we train it to a new environment. So one of the things we're going to be looking forward to working with all of you on is, as we take these technologies that are embodied in our Watson system and bring it to this new field and this new field and this new field, we don't want it to take a year or 6 months, or even a month to be able to start to understand a new environment, a new domain. We'd like to have the technology learn as quickly as possible. That's something we've made tremendous progress on, but I see tremendous promise because of the breadth of disciplines and expertise that you have here. That could be one of the things that could be very exciting to work on together. So again, just a few thoughts going back to some very interesting and significant advice given to me a very long time ago. It's a pattern we've seen before from the invention of electrical engineering in its modern form to the invention of computer science. I skipped over the invention of services science, which is another similar story. And now I think we're at a point where IT is becoming convenient enough and useful enough that it's going to be thought of less. It's going to be under the covers and present and usable without the need for practitioners and expertise in the details. And now we graduate to this level of AI taking over, because at the end of the day, that's what all of our customers have always wanted. It's all about my domain, it's all about my data, and it's all about the influence of that data on my business. So we finally arrived at a point where we can offer them that promise without requiring them to be experts in the implementation details of all the technology underneath. So we're at an exciting time together. We're crossing a bridge together today from a set of ideas to a set of actions that are already touching students at all levels, and every day touch our business when we think about how on earth we're going to populate our business with the kind of expertise we need going forward. It's going to be because of the work we do together that we're going to have that supply of expertise available to us in the future. Thank you all very much.
We have time for a couple of questions. Maury?
Thank you very much. Maury Cohen. I'm a professor of sustainability studies here at NJIT, and I've last couple of years been teaching a course. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Last couple of years, I've been teaching a course on the social dimensions of artificial intelligence
Yes.
and digital automation. And it may not be the case here at NJIT, and it's probably not the case at IBM. But in the wider world, there's a tremendous amount of trepidation and anxiety about the disruption that will inevitably be unleashed as AI finds itself into more and more business applications and to wider societal applications. And this isn't an argument of a critic by any means, but it's sort of recognizing that every general purpose technology, from the internal combustion engine, going back even further to the weaving loom, creates winners and losers. Just the question, I guess, is what kind of thinking strategically is going on, both within IBM and as part of this partnership, in recognizing and validating those sources of social anxiety.
Right. So it's an excellent point. It's something that's quite a popular topic in the press because it generates a lot of eyeball traffic and a lot of excited readers. I would say that we're very optimistic that if we're straightforward with our clients about the implications of the technology, and we have a set of policies saying, as I said before, if we're going to train a system for you, where are we going to get the data? Because what data we select as a corpus to train the system is going to have an effect on how the system performs. And we want to have you as a client of ours understand where that data came from, how that system was trained, how reliable you can expect it to be. And it's really a fundamentally different point of view than the sort of broad-scale consumer applications of the technology that a lot of other companies work on. Our interest is in AI for business applications. So that's actually distinguishable from kind of a consumer application. I wouldn't say it's unrelated, but I'd say it's distinguishable. And I think, as in all these things, education is always, that's why I admire what all of you do, because any debate you have about any of this stuff will always come back to education and insight being the foundation of humans making an intelligent choice. And so we want our customers to be informed about the implications of the technology. We want to be honest and straightforward and transparent about how the technology works, whether your data will be mixed with other people's data to create insights for your competitors or not. You might choose to do it either way. And so we're not saying there's one prescription for how to do this, but what we're saying is we'll be absolutely clear and straightforward. In a AI for business environment, that's a very different set of trade-offs than you would make in a broad-scale consumer business. So we have a different perspective, but our perspective is very optimistic that if we're straightforward and honest with the clients and they have the insight to understand these trade-offs, that they'll be able to make the right choices for themselves. But it's an excellent question, and it's something that I think the academic community could make an enormous contribution to in terms of policy implications that go along with the use of these technologies, and how to make sure that we're aware of them as a very starting point. What we should do about them may depend on a deeper insight, but without being aware of them, you can't even make the right choices, I think.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Bernard Rollins. I'm a graduate in New Jersey Institute of Technology, my alumni. The question I have is that NJIT has grown, and it's grown tremendously. It's grown to the Caribbean, it's grown to Africa, China, and other parts of the world. Quite a lot of students from overseas come here, graduate, leave, and go home. After the marriage between NJIT and IBM is taking place, and we started to grow and we started to develop, what happens now to individuals who have left NJIT and gone home to places like my country, Guyana? How would you, because the technology is going to eventually find itself there, and it's there, I mean, it's there already. So I want to know how is IBM looking at merging and working?
Yeah.
Guyana is now one of the leading producers now, not producing yet, but has got a lot of oil potential. Not potential, but it's uncovered that now Guyana has become one of the places in South America. IBM and NJIT, how do you see yourself going into places like the Caribbean and South America later on after this marriage has been successful?
Okay. So you heard when Naguib was being introduced that before he worked with my team in corporate technology, he was the CTO for IBM Middle East Africa. And you've probably seen it in the press, but IBM's been very clear that we're very interested in how the continent of Africa emerges as a first-class economic power in the world. And it's clear that that's already happening in pockets. It's clear that it's going to happen more broadly. People often make analogies to what happened in China. I think the situations are actually quite different, although maybe there's a tiny bit of similarity. But as we looked at what was going on the continent of Africa, it was obvious to us that it was going to be very important for our business. And again, when we come back to what does it mean to be important to our business, what it means is that we need to have the right technical capabilities in our sales force, in our research, in our development. And so one of the things we did was we opened up one of our research labs. We actually put a new research lab on the ground in Kenya. We looked all around the continent, and we ended up choosing that. It's an interesting discussion how that all was figured out. One of the things that surprised us and delighted us was when we started recruiting for PhD researchers to join our lab in Kenya, a whole bunch of people came to us who were native Africans who had come to the US or Europe to get a PhD, to get some form of education, and they wanted to go home. And they wanted to go home and contribute at the level of a PhD scientist. And they told us that there weren't a lot of places to go. There were some academic institutions, but not much else. And so instead of having to recruit and actively seek candidates, we were deluged with diaspora candidates, if you like, folks who had come, gotten a first-class education, and were dying to go home and apply this technique that they had, these capabilities they had developed, typically as PhDs, back home. And so it was very interesting to see. Now, we are present all over the world. That's the nature of our business, not just our research labs, but our entire business around the world. And it's up to NJIT what aspiration it wants to have in terms of global outreach, and I'll leave it to them to answer that. But I would tell you that if NJIT has that aspiration, adding that dimension to our partnership would be delightful for us.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Simon, Vice Provost of Undergraduate Study and also Professor of Chemical Engineering and a user of artificial intelligence. So my question will be, as a user of artificial intelligence, how do you answer the criticism as to, even at the end of the day, when you train the process, you still don't have a physical understanding of the process? So that's what I usually get when
Yes, so that's a common issue that's brought up, and I think my example of the early medicine applications, that was the first thing we tried other than just general knowledge and general question answering, and it hit us in the face, in the first conversation we had with a medical practitioner. How do I know if I can believe this thing? How do I know if I can base my treatment of a patient on the advice that it's giving me? And we evolved, in that case, a couple of simple principles. One of them I talked about at a little bit of length, which is the system is prepared to explain itself. Now, it may not be prepared to show you the neural network that underlies the actual computation, because that's probably too complex to visualize. You could argue that's the beauty of the technology, that it can find that even if a human couldn't, and it's statistically valid. But it will explain itself in terms of pointing to the original sources that it used. And so once the physician said, oh, there's a study or there's a paper, no physician can read every study and every paper. We've gone so far past what any physician could ever hope to do that the biggest value add our medical system could have to you as an oncologist, if you've got a patient with an obscure form of cancer, is to show you a clinical trial or a couple of papers that are relevant to that one patient that you have here in, say, Newark, New Jersey, that you never reasonably could have found. I mean, once you found it, you could understand it, and your expertise could interpret those results to benefit your patient, but the chances of you finding it are zero. So in the case of medicine, even if I can't explain myself by showing the neural net, I can explain myself by saying, this is the thing that went into my neural net that gave enough weight to make me recommend it. Why don't you, the human expert, read this? And again, I don't hear our technologists use the word humility, but humility seems like the right word, because the system that we build extracts insight from the training from human experts, but it doesn't become as expert as the human. It can't go as deep as a human expert. On the other hand, it can take that modest depth of understanding, which is way more than any system has ever had before, and apply it to the entire published medical literature on the planet, which a human can't do. And then it can hopefully find the things most likely to bring them to the human and say, here's the 10 things you ought to read, not the 1 million things you'll never get a chance to read. If any of you have been around technology long enough, do you remember when Alta Vista first came out as the big internet search engine? So the first 3 times you used it, you were like, oh my God, I have power that I can't, I feel like I'm Captain Kirk talking to the library computer on the Enterprise. The 4th time you used it, you said, oh my goodness, it's given me so many possible answers, and they're not in any intelligent order. I'll never be able to sort through all of these things. Right? So it went from marvelous to useless very, very quickly because it couldn't understand the relevance. And the good search engines today are good principally because they understand something more about relevance. But they use a very thin analytical level. We're talking about a much deeper level of analytics and understanding. And so I think it will remain a challenge for these systems. We'll always want them to explain themselves more. We're always going to want to have practitioners that have enough real education and real science knowledge that even if they don't know the implementation details, they know the kinds of biases that can exist. This debate has come up in training data scientists. What if we take visualization and analytic tools and we make them so easy to use that somebody can sit down and compose a set of analytics of incredible power and then take a set of data and then make a prediction? Well, if I've got no training in statistics and no training in mathematics and no training in the underlying physics or chemistry, how would I have any confidence that that stream of analyses was actually valid? And so we've actually had these conversations that, maybe you can make things like, basic analytics too consumable, because you basically put them in the hands of people that can push the buttons without having any idea what they do, and then they get a result. How do they know if it's useful? And so this is where I think we always want to remain grounded, and our academic friends are great at helping us remain grounded, which is however easy to use the technology becomes, the people wielding it must have a degree of understanding, not necessarily of the implementation, but they have to understand what it's doing and why it works the way it does. And I think that will be an ongoing journey for us to do that better level of explanation to solve that problem.
One last question?
Can you give us a sketch of the status of this type of capability and its impact on law and justice?
So the law domain has often been a fascinating domain for the application of artificial intelligence. And our research team has worked on this almost since the inception of the project, because it turns out that because law is built up from a set of precedents from prior cases, it lends itself to the kind of modest depth and very large breadth to collect cases that might be relevant to a lawyer. So are you talking about the practice of law or the actual content of the law?
Well, because there's always so much argument and so much research, and those things lend themselves to the application?
Right. So I think that these kinds of technologies, I think, will have a tremendous effect on making much more efficient the practice of law. Now, the actual content of the law is a different story, because the debate tends to be about philosophy and principles and not so much logic. And I think that's something that's still in the human realm. The one project we've done that approaches this is at our research lab in Haifa, Israel. One of our researchers was a high school debater. And so he looked at the Watson technology doing question answering, which is how it started back in the days of the Jeopardy match. And he said, that's interesting that it can answer questions. I wonder if it can frame arguments. I wonder if it could understand someone else's argument and respond to it. He said, I wonder if we could take the Watson technology and build a debater out of it. So a competitive debater like you would have in a high school or college debate team. And if you're interested, you can search that on the web, or you can talk to one of us and we can give you some links to it. And there's some interesting videos of it out there. And one of the things that they did was they turned the system to the corpus of the Wikipedia. And as you know, the Wikipedia has this property that controversial topics will get edited very quickly by people with opposing points of view. So you can actually look at the metadata of the Wikipedia infrastructure and find out what are the hot topics, because they'll often get changed as competing people, put one article on top of another. So first they looked for controversial topics that would make good debate topics. Then what they did was they used the technology to discover arguments pro and con to a certain position, and then they had the system do the basic first steps of framing an argument for or against something. So the system didn't so much take a position. One of the examples I remember they worked on was, should the UK continue to have a monarchy or not? Another one was, does violence in video games affect actual human behavior of people playing the games? And there were half a dozen topics they picked that were very hot from a Wikipedia point of view. And then they had the system frame arguments for and against. And as my boss, John Kelly, likes to say, the machine got so good at arguing that we just let it argue with itself, that we had the machine frame both sides of the argument. And I think that could really help the practice of law by basically elucidating what the pro and con arguments look like at a depth more than a human could probably assemble. But I think the decision of which is the correct answer, which is the correct policy, which is the correct legal philosophy, I think is still firmly in the domain of humans. But if the system could assemble more knowledge and could structure that knowledge in a way that the humans could make a wiser decision, I think we would have moved forward. We would have? We will. Well, we haven't quite gotten there yet, so I'm sure one of the English professors can correct my grammar. All right.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.